If there was a prize going for the most ridiculous all-in-one CPU cooler name, this would win hands down. Originally this video was going to be a simple case review of this new ASUS TUF GT502. It's a brand new chassis from ASUS, but then a new TUF Gaming B650 motherboard arrived. So did an ROG Ryuo 3 AIO that also arrived, and so did these new TUF Gaming TF120 fans. So instead of just doing a simple case review, I'm going to combine everything together in one and do a bit of a case review slash TUF ROG build using these new parts, because I want to have a look at them all in one go, and I'm sure you guys can't wait to have a look at these new ASUS parts as well. So stick around and we'll take a look at the lot. So let's start by looking at this new ASUS TUF Gaming GT502. The first time I saw this, it reminded me of a couple of different cases. It almost looks like the love child of a Lian Li 011 Dynamic and the Corsair Crystal 280X, I think it is. I think if you put those two together, this is what had come out. This is available, or it's at least available to pre-order now from places like OC UK, priced at around 150 to 160 pounds in the UK. There was also supposed to be a GT502 Plus version that had extra ARGB features. I think it had an ARGB controller built in. This one does not. That GT502 Plus seems to have been scrapped now, so that isn't going to be available. So as I said, this is I'd say it's a standard ATX tower, but it's not really a standard as we would think of standard, because it is one of those dual chamber cases. So one side you've got all your motherboard, graphics card, all your hardware components, and then in the other side there's space for power supply. You can also install some fans and AIO or a radiator in this other side, so that'd be interesting to take a look at that. On two sides of the case there's tempered glass, so the side panel and the front panel, you can't install any fans in that front panel. There's no brackets or anything there to screw them to. What would look nice in that front panel would be some kind of distro plate if you're going to be water cooling. Also down the front here you've got the TUF Gaming logo and some other things kind of embossed or pressed into the steel, and a little TUF logo down at the bottom there as well. There is also the front I/O connections are all on the front here. On there you have a single headphone socket for headphones and microphones, two USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A ports, a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port. You also have your power and reset buttons on here and an LED control button. It is a modular design in this case, so there's a lot of panels that come off. So we'll start off by taking the side panels off. So this side, you press a button in at the back, and then that tempered glass panel just lifts out, and you can see it does have a slight tint to it. Then you should be able to just pop off the front panel. You can see that tempered glass panel is just held in place with some of these quick release pins, and again it has the same level as tint as the side panel. The top panel is also removable, but first you need to take off these straps, because on the top here are some straps for carrying it around, and maybe if you're taking it to some kind of LAN or something like that, you've got these straps here. They're really heavy duty straps as well, so once you get your system built inside, there should be no worry of those straps, you know, breaking or coming undone under the weight of the system. So remove both of those straps, and then this top panel, that just lifts off. On this top panel you have a dust filter in there, which I think is just magnetic. Yeah, so that dust filter pulls out, and you've got a large open perforated metal mesh kind of top to it. The other side panel comes off in the same way, so it's a quick release button you press in at the back, and then that lifts out again, and we can see there's a series of vents on this panel. So up at the top here, this is a vent for fans, because you can install a radiator in the back of the case. There's obviously a power supply vent as well there, and the vent here, if you look on the actual panel, that's labelled as HDD, so that's going to allow some possible airflow into the hard drive, especially if you've got some fans installed in that back panel, because I would think that it will suck air in from the bottom vent and then blow out at the top. I might install the AIO up there later and see how that works. In terms of radiator installation, you can install up to a 360mm radiator at the top, so that also includes a 240. You can also fit a 280 in here. At this second compartment, you can fit up to a 360mm radiator in here, and again, like I say, 280s, 240s, even a 120 can be installed in here. Alternatively, in both these compartments, you can fit up to 320mm fans or 240mm fans. There's also another panel at the bottom of the case, so if you just undo 2 screws. That's another bracket that lifts out, and again on here you can fit up to 3 120mm fans. You could also put 240mm fans on there. This also doubles up as an SSD stroke hard drive tray as well, because you can see down the side of the motherboard tray here we've got several brackets, so you can unscrew these and take the 4 screws out, and they can be removed, and then you can install a 2.5 or 3.5 inch drive on there, and then you can install it onto this bottom tray. If you want to have your hard drives on show at the front, you can install them at the bottom there, or alternatively they can be installed in the back as normal. So that's one bracket that removes. This top one as well, a couple of screws you just need to remove from the top. And then that radiator stroke fan bracket, that can be removed as well, so might make it a little bit easier installing a radiator in there. You can take this out, screw your radiator to this, and then put it back into the case. In the main motherboard compartment you can fit up to an ATX motherboard, so that also includes micro ATX, mini ITX. It doesn't include eATX though. At the back there's 8 PCIe slot cutouts and 3 additional vertical slot cutouts. That uses an accessory that comes with the case if you want a vertical mount. I'll show you that in a moment. Maximum CPU cooler height is 163mm. Maximum graphics card length is 400mm, so the latest 40 series card should fit in here, no problem, and the maximum power supply length is 200mm. Around the back of the case you can see the dual chamber design a bit better. Up at the top here the space for up to 120mm fans, I/O cutout, 8 PCIe slots there, which you can also change into a vertical mounted slot, which I'll show you in a minute, and then there's a power supply cutout here, so power supply is kind of stood up on its side inside this rear compartment. In terms of accessories, there is a small box of accessories that you get with this case, with the usual motherboard screws and a few zip ties and stuff like that. But one of the interesting accessories is this, which is the vertical mount adapter plate. So what you need to do for that is open up the cover at the back there. You need to remove most of these PCIe slots, but just leaving the top and the bottom one. So just remove all of those, and then you should be able to just slide this in place. That just slides in there, then you just insert 2 screws here and 2 screws in the back, and then that gives you your vertical mounting. You've also got a sticker down here that's pretty handy. It says ASUS case on it as well, so if you've forgotten who you bought your case off, just have to look at the back there, and that gives you a good reminder. Another accessory that comes with the case is this little contraption here. So this is kind of a GPU anti-sag bracket. Not sure exactly how that's used, but I'm sure it shows you in the user manual. So if I need that later, I'll give that a whirl and see how that works. And spin the case around, and then we've got the other compartment. So in here at the bottom, you can install the power supply there. There looks like there's plenty of space in here for cable management. Down at the bottom here is another modular part of the case, so there's a couple of thumb screws that actually hold this in position. So just remove both of these thumb screws. Neither of those are captive thumb screws, and then that's another mounting bracket or cage for either a 3.5 inch or 2.5 inch drive. You can fit up to either 4 2.5 inch or 4 3.5 inch drives, because you can also install them on these brackets here that I mentioned earlier. So there's 3 there and then 1 in this cage. Also around this side of the case you can fit fans and radiators as well onto this bracket here. So again, there's a couple of screws at each side that hold this in place. You remove those. Quite kind of smart feature as well here is that when you remove those screws, this doesn't just fall out, because there's some like kind of pegs that it holds in place on, which is good as well, because you don't really want that falling out when you undo it if you've got a load of fans and radiators connected to it. So as I said earlier, this bracket you can install up to a 360mm radiator on here. You can also fit a 280. You can also fit a 120 or a 140 radiator as well. Alternatively, you can put in here 3 120mm fans or up to 2 140mm fans. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work, although It does look like it has plenty of ventilation in this compartment. There's a vent at the back here, and then those vents in the side panel, so I'm guessing you'll be able to get some airflow from the bottom and then out from the top vent in that rear panel. I'm really interested to see how that works actually, so I'm thinking when I do start the build in here, I might install the AIO radiator in here and just put a load of fans in the main compartment. Then on the floor of the case, there's not a lot going on. There's just 4 feet with anti-vibration rubber pads on. They're quite tall, these feet. I'd say probably between 20 to 25 millimeters, which should give good ground clearance and allow airflow in through that bottom vent. I say earlier that that bottom vent is quite restricted because it has got a dust filter on here, and it's one of those that's kind of made out of like a nylon or a plastic mesh material, and then it's inside this plastic frame. Just slide out nice and easily though, so cleaning it shouldn't be an issue. You could always remove it if you want to decrease the restriction of airflow. And then there's a nice big vent down there for fans, radiators, whatever you want to put in there. Okay, so that's a brief description of the ASUS GT502 covered. If you want to learn more about this case, check out kitguru.net. There will be a written page for this video. Full specs of this case will be on there as well. And if you have anything you want to say about this case, let me know in the comment section. While you're there, don't forget to give us a thumbs up as well if you like this video, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so now. So that's the case. For the build, I'm also going to be using an ASUS motherboard. It's this new TUF Gaming B650. Interested to look at this. It is a really nice looking board actually, and with the recent reductions in price for Black Friday on the AMD 7000 processors, B650 is looking a bit more of an attractive proposition now. The money you're saving on the CPU can go towards a better motherboard or some DDR5 now, so maybe B650 does look a bit more attractive with those reductions. I like the look of this board. It's got kind of an industrial look to it, which I think all TUF products have a bit of a hardcore industrial style look to them, but this one in particular, I love this heatsink design on here. This does give it a really big and tough and industrial style to it. Also the little accents as well in yellow as well. I like that. I really like the look of this. I'm really impressed with how it looks. As well as the looks, you've also got some really good specs with the B650 platform. Obviously, it supports the latest AMD Ryzen 7000 CPU, so anything from the 7600X up to the 7950X. It also supports PCIe Gen 5 up to a maximum of 128 gigabytes of DDR5 memory. This board also supports AMD EXPO profiles. In terms of connectivity, on here there's a 2.5 gigabit Realtek Ethernet adapter, Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2. Healthy rear I/O connectivity, and that includes 3 USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, 2 Type A and 1 Type C, 1 USB 3.2 Gen 2 by 2 Type C ports, 4 USB 2.0 Type A ports, a single display port, a single HDMI port, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, 5 audio jacks, and the BIOS flashback button. The only Ryzen 7000 I could get my hands on for this build was the 7600X, so that's the Ryzen 5 7600X. I'll be using that in the build. One great thing as well about B650, which you don't get on Intel's alternative B660 platform, is overclocking. So I will also have a go at overclocking the 7600X as well, see what we can get out of that. Graphics card for the build will be this GeForce RTX 3080 TUF Gaming. This is the 12 gigabyte memory version. And then the fans that ASUS sent over for the build are these TUF Gaming TF120s. These have advanced fluid dynamic bearing rated for up to 250,000 hours of operation, a PWM speed range of between 250 to 1900 RPM, maximum airflow rate of 76 cubic feet per minute, maximum noise levels of 29 decibels. And then inside the hub behind the blades, they also have a double LED array, which is supposed to give brilliant ARGB effects. And the 3-pack, which you can see here, I've not been able to see an exact UK price for this, but I've seen them available in the US for around about $50, which does sound pretty good value. You also get an ARGB controller inside the box that accepts up to 4 standard 3-pin 5-volt connections. You can see they are just standard 4-pin PWM connections and a standard 3-pin 5-volt connection on there, so you could potentially just buy one of these on their own. I think they're around about $14 on their own, and connect them directly up to the motherboard. ASUS has also sent over this new cooler. This, as I said earlier, it's the most weird name I've ever heard for a CPU cooler ever, I think. Not really sure what that means at all or how to pronounce it, but this is the ROG Ryuo or Ryuo 360mm ARGB CPU cooler, and this features the latest 8th generation ASUS TUF pump with 3-phase motor that spins up to 2600 RPM. It has a standard 27mm thick aluminium radiator with a black powder coated finish. On the CPU block top there's also a mini LED array that can display ROG exclusive content, system stats and custom animations. The fans that come with this are ROG ARGB fans, and they have a speed range of between 300 to 2200 RPM, PWM controlled, high static pressure, maximum noise output of 36.45 decibels. The ROG Ryuo 3 is compatible with all current desktop platforms from Intel and AMD, including AM5 and Intel LGA 1700. So I've been doing a bit of thinking about the build, and because the GT502 Plus with the extra ARGB controller has been scrapped, and I've only got a 3-pack of these TF120s. I wanted to put more than 3 fans in the system. There's a space at the back here, space on the floor, space in the roof, possibly those in the back as well. So I'm going to do a bit of a, not so much an anti-RGB, but a subtle RGB build, which means I'm going to try out these new Seasonic MagFlow fans. Apparently these can be daisy chained to each other and they have magnetic connectors. So be interesting to see how they work as well. I've also just got a kit of this Kingston Fury memory. So this is DDR5 6000 and it supports AMD EXPO. Not used any EXPO memory yet. I'd rather use that on this B650 platform rather than using XMP. So we'll check that out as well and see how that works. And then I think the final piece of the puzzle is the power supply. And for that I'm going to be using this Seasonic Prime Titanium 850 watt. Can still get away with using 850 watts with the 3080 and the 7600X quite comfortably. So that's the power supply. Let's put all this together, see how it goes. Well, the build's complete. As you can see, it doesn't look too bad. There's a lot of space inside the system. Plenty of room if you wanted to add some custom water cooling in there. For the most part, the build went okay. As I said, there's space in the system. It's easy to access things. The removable brackets for the fans and things like that are pretty good. Structurally, it feels solid. Panels remove and fit back together well, and all that seems pretty good. But I did have a bit of an issue. I don't know whether you saw in the time-lapse whether you could make it out, but when I was trying to install the AIO radiator in that back compartment using that removable bracket, I struggled. If I'm being completely honest, I think that's a bad idea, because you have to remove one of these plates to pass the CPU block through, and then you've got like a slot cut out down the side of that plate where the tubing goes. And even with this ASUS AIO, which you would think is tested with the case, it's very tight. The tolerances are very tight, so you have to be really accurate with where you screw the AIO to the bracket. Even then, you feel like it's not really supposed to go, and bits of the case feel like they're bended, and it's really tough to get it in place. And not only that, when you finish and you have got it in place, you end up with one of these that is left off because you can't get it back on, or you can't easily get it back on after it's installed, and you find that part of the radiator is squashed right up to this kind of recessed bit of the motherboard tray. So I don't think it's a good idea. In future, if I use this case again, I'd either mount a radiator at the top, or I forgot to mention earlier, you can mount radiators down the side or fans down the side there as well. I think that would be a better place to mount the radiator. But I did get it in, so it is possible, but I don't like the idea of having to force it in and really struggling. Maybe with a smaller radiator, it might be a bit easier. But I think that is a really bad idea. I don't really see the point of it, to be honest, when you've got this top mount, potentially the bottom. If you're running custom cooling, you could put a radiator in there, and that side mount. So if I was to build a system in this case again, I definitely wouldn't be installing the radiator in that back compartment. At least it was good to be able to experience it, and then you guys know that if you do want to buy one of these cases, not a good idea. Other than that, it's not a bad case. If you like this dual chamber design, you might fancy it, but I don't see how it's any improvement over something like the Lian Li 011 Dynamic, or even, to be honest, the Corsair Crystal 280X, which is quite an old case by today's standards. I don't see how that improves on either of those. CPU cooler, being an ASUS tech, it's pretty easy to install. It's got these brackets for the AM4, AM5 installation. It uses the standard backplate. You just screw your brackets to it, and it's quite easy, quite quick to install. It has got a bit of noise from the pump. I don't know whether this is a thing with 8th gen ASUS tech or just this model, but if you put a bit of pressure on the pump top, it quietens that noise down a little. So whether this top's a bit rattly with the vibration, I'm not sure. Other thing as well, you probably noticed, the logo, I can't seem to change it round. Normally you just go into the software and rotate the display, but in the ASUS Armory crate, the option for rotating the display seems to be greyed out, and I can't for the life of me figure out how to do it. Maybe there is a way to do it, maybe the firmware update might fix it or something like that, but it's stuck like that for now. I spent probably 20 minutes or longer trying to figure it out, and to be honest, I just got fed up. Funnily enough, one of my favourite bits about this build wasn't anything to do with ASUS, it was actually the Seasonic MagFlow fans and getting a chance to use those. They're really interesting actually. They're very similar to the Lian Li Uni fans, how you can clip them all together and screw them into case, but instead of kind of clipping and sliding them together, what you do with these is you just bring them up to each other, and they have very strong magnets on them, and they just magnetically hold together, and the connections make contact that way. So I really like those. Hopefully Seasonic will bring out some RGB versions of those to please everyone. But if you don't like RGB on your fans and you are interested in buying something other than Noctua or Be Quiet, these Seasonic MagFlow are worth a look, definitely. I did say I was going to try a bit of overclocking on this system. I know the 7600X probably isn't the CPU that your enthusiasts will be overclocking, but it's the only one I was able to get my hands on for this video. There's a few ways you can overclock on B650, pretty much the same as you could do on previous Ryzen platforms. You can either use the AMD Ryzen Master software and use the Precision Boost Overdrive. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to use the ASUS AI overclock tuner inside the BIOS, or you can manually overclock as well, and the manual overclock is what I've gone for in the end. So I didn't have to do a lot at all to get a good stable overclock at high frequency as well on the 7600X. All I did basically was go into the ASUS BIOS, enable AMD EXPO as the AMD equivalent to XMP, so you can see the memory is running at 6000 megahertz, which according to AMD is the optimal speed for Ryzen 7000. And then the only other thing I needed to do really was disable core performance boost and then change the CPU core ratio from auto, which it was at default, to CPU core ratio, and then I just set that at 56, so that should give me a 5.6 gigahertz all-core overclock. Set the load line calibration to level 1, and then if we scroll further down you can see the CPU core voltage is at 1.34 volts. So back in Windows, you can see the system's up and running, and it's running Cinebench R23, and it's in a loop constantly for 60-minute test, this one, just to see if the system's stable. I have run some longer duration system stability tests. This one's been running for just 10 minutes, and you can see the CPU frequency there locked at 5.6 gigahertz across all cores. Temperature is at 77 degrees, so that sounds pretty good, although it is only the 7600X, and the package power is only about 120 watts at the moment, so you'd expect it to be keeping cool under that 360mm AIO CPU cooler. But it's completely stable, so the board obviously is doing a good job at the overclocking, or the manual overclocking is working well with this motherboard. So that's pretty much it for this build, and taking a look at these new ASUS products. The GT502, it's alright if you like one of these dual chamber style cases. It's not the smallest case in the world, it's quite bulky. Width wise it's quite large, so it might be a bit of a struggle to have on your desk. But if you want a case that's got some sturdy handles for maybe moving it about a lot, taking it to your friend's house, going to LAN parties or gaming events or something like that, they are good. And you obviously can fit big graphics cards, latest motherboards, everything like that will fit inside it. You can get plenty of fans inside it. The Ryuo 3 AIO, that seems to do a good job on this 7600X. This isn't a full review or anything like that. No idea how it would perform on more powerful CPUs, but it is an 8th gen ASUS Tech. ASUS Tech's generally good, so it probably will be okay. Installation's pretty simple. What else can you say about it? The only thing that I can say about this is I've seen it priced at £299, which is a lot of money for an all-in-one CPU cooler, especially when there's some really good budget AIOs about these days. The TUF Gaming B650 plus Wi-Fi motherboard, I do like that. I really like that. In fact, the look of it really suits my style. I like that industrial look. Maybe if you did manage to pick up an AMD Ryzen 7000 CPU during the recent Black Friday reductions, then maybe B650 looks like a more attractive prospect. I think this board is just over £200, so what you saved on the CPU might be worth putting towards the board and some DDR5 memory now. I hope you've enjoyed watching this ASUS TUF GT502 case semi-review stroke build. If you have, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you've liked watching the video. If you don't already subscribe to the channel, make sure you do that now. If you like what we do here at Kit Guru and you want to help support us, you can always head over to our store and pick up some of the new merch. And if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to our website.